All right. So my name is Chris Bridgewater. Can you guys see the actual presentation, or are you still seeing like the PowerPoint working slides?
It's the actual presentation, so you're good.
Okay, great. So my name is Chris Bridgewater. I want to thank Anita for having me here and giving me an opportunity to share some of my knowledge with all you new entrepreneurs. So hopefully I have some good tips for you guys today. It was a bit of a last minute for me to jump in here, so a lot of this is kind of a rough form of my experiences and staying in manufacturing and things to look out for. So hopefully this helps a lot of you. Some of you that are doing software as a service may not get a lot out of it, but hopefully there's some principles that I lay out that you can apply. So why am I here? Well, as Anita said, I have won multiple SBIRs. Technically we've won 3. We couldn't accept 1 because the other one was exactly the same, but the other one offered more money. So we took the one with more money. The 2 that I've won were both in a pitch day format with the United States Air Force. And the total of those was about $1.5 million. So that was a good source of revenue for the company. From there, from those, we set up a very intensive manufacturing line at Delta Development Team. I'm no longer a part of that company. I stepped down to focus on my kids while my wife is in med school. So that's why I'm no longer there. It was just time for me to move on. But anyway, the company's still doing great, still doing strong. They're selling APRUs, manufacturing them, and all that stuff. I'm also an Axion certified ISO 1345 auditor. So if anybody that's dealing with medical stuff, you're gonna get into 1345 really quick, or CFR Part 820. So anything to deal with medical whatsoever, you're gonna have to have some knowledge of these 2 certifications, in addition to being audited and receiving the certification as well. So with that, I'll move into the next stuff here. Pull out my notes here real quick. All right, so some considerations to take into account for your internal impacts. All right, so a lot of stuff is based on ISO. If you're not going for anything medical, you can just do basic ISO 9001.
Chris, yes, it looks like we have now a slideshow, resume slideshow screen.
Huh. All right.
We had your next slide, and then it moved over to something else.
Sorry about that. How's that?
Perfect.
Okay. So as I was saying, at a minimum, anybody that's manufacturing anything, you want to look at 9001 certifications. You don't necessarily need to get an audit, but what it does is it gives you a good template for standing up a manufacturing line or any kind of assembly process that you're doing. Just gives you some good principles to follow there. Now, for those of you that are manufacturing stuff or you're putting stuff out on site, whatever the case may be, you want to consider first your environmental impacts. So safety, worker health, and worker efficiencies. And the reason you want to look at these, other than just being polite to your workers, when you're polite to your workers, you think about, you've got employee retention. You want to protect them, make sure they have all the right PPE, make sure there's not a lot of noise pollution, and then in ISO 1345, they also dig down into lighting requirements. Do you have the appropriate lighting in there? Do you have documented procedures for what the employee should be wearing? It's long sleeve shirts, steel toe boots, whatever the case may be, right? Eye protection, things like that. So one, you want to protect your workers, increase retention, and improve quality of the product. Because if your workers are comfortable and are able to work efficiently or not be strained by something, they're going to be able to focus on what they're doing, assembling that product, and so your quality of your product should increase. Right now, I will say that quality control is a sliding scale of surety of quality of the product on one side and time and money on the other. So the more testing and quality assurance you do in the manufacturing process, the more time and money it will take, right? So you have to balance those two things. You don't want to go into the red, trying to make sure that every single product is 100, is exactly stands up to every single thing you want to do, but you do want to make sure that it's going to be safe for the end user or the client, right? So you just have to, you can use some Excel and some basic math equations. You can calculate cost and time of the QA, QC in consideration of the risk of the product failing, and especially in medical devices. There was a lot of medical, a few medical startups here. So I will kind of talk about that briefly, is that it's all about risk to the patient, right? Is the way that 1345 and CFR Part 820 are worded. So you want to think about those things whenever you're considering your QA, QC processes, okay? Be sure to consider what processes can occur overnight as far as your QA, QC stuff, right? Because you can do some stuff, a lot of times it's a burn-in test that you're just going to run the unit, especially a lot of units I made, they had to be run in a hot environment and in a cold environment before you ship them out. So, you would run it in a 100-degree oven, right, at a certain set point, and we would have lots of data recorders in there to record that data, just using LabVIEW to record that data. And then just review the data in the morning and things will just automatically shut off. So when you do that, you also want to consider safety factors, and you want to make sure you have a good electrician to look at that stuff for you. All right. Whenever you're talking about, high-end stuff, delicate stuff, right, precision stuff, you want to pay attention to the guidelines for calibration of your equipment and your tooling. All right, checking those gaps, checking those tolerances, making sure that all your sensors and meters are reading the right readings, within tolerance. Okay. Think about, you want to plan far in advance as you're designing your product. You kind of want to, in conjunction or a bit of an in situ situation, you want to think about your work instructions. Are you going to have travelers communicating inventory levels throughout every echelon of the company? And then, what is your process to order more parts, and whose responsibility is that, right? Because you can automate those things too, even through QuickBooks. You can now automate that ordering process where it detects that your supply levels are this low, and it'll automatically send out a PO to your supplier to get more supplies in, right? And you also want to work with your packaging and crating supplier early in the process, because you may realize that something has to change. It just can't be packaged, it just can't be shipped. This design that you're making, the product just can't be shipped securely. It's at a high risk, and it's worth putting a little more, making the walls just a little bit more thicker to withstand shipping issues, things like that. Okay, so you want to think about the timing of the processes. We'll maybe get into that a little bit more. Inventory tracking control. It's a huge principle, a huge cornerstone of your manufacturing processes, is making sure that your inventory tracking and control is on par, because besides having a bad product go off the line, one of the worst things you can do is having all your employees sitting there and not able to do a single thing because you didn't order enough inventory, or you just lost sight of the ball. You just lost track of that process. Your QA, QC stations, put all that together as you're going through the process. You design something, and then, okay, well, when we're manufacturing it, how are we going to ensure quality is up to the utmost highest value that we can get when we're manufacturing this, right? So you're going to think about that. Total life cycle, your inputs, your outputs, all your your labor that goes into it, the design that goes into it, software that goes into, firmware that goes into it. All right, shipping, think about shipping early in the beginning, and then maintaining your equipment, trigger manufacturing. It's funny is that you in these processes and some really complex other products I've been involved with, sometimes it gets forgotten. Well, how are we actually going to kick this off? How are we going to trigger a manufacturing order? It's not like you just, maybe you don't really think about it, or maybe you have. You don't really just all of a sudden come in and just make as many as you can, as fast as you can. There's a lot more that goes into it. And there should be a whole process and procedure that can expand with your company. As your company, you want to be ready to expand and scale up with your processes and procedures, so that as you get bigger and bigger, there's going to be more and more people in your manufacturing chain, both on the back office side and on the front end side, right? And there could be it could be a spec order, or it could be you're just going to build in advance orders, right? Where you're just going to tell everybody in the company, just, all right, we're just going to build 20 this month because we know we're going to sell 15 or 20, between 15 and 20 next month, right? And depends on your lead times, depends on all kinds of stuff, right? And then also building, you want to make sure that your manufacturing processes are getting plugged into your CRM processes as well. Okay, everybody can still see it? Considerations for internal impact or external impacts? Hopefully you can.
Yes, perfect.
Thanks, Anita. Okay, so I say here is that we're going to go over external impacts, your suppliers, risk assessments, critical suppliers, backup suppliers, supplier evaluations and surveys, and then your shipping to from considerations, geopolitical, weather, and timing. Okay, so those are the things that I was worried about as the CEO, right? What's going on around the world, right? So making the product in the house is only half the process. Identifying and selecting suppliers should be given sufficient time. You really want to give yourself a lot of time. You'll be looking at suppliers from the very, very start. As soon as you start getting deciding, oh, we need to use this sensor, we need to use this wire, we need to use this thermistor, right? You want to start sourcing those suppliers, and you want to start really digging down and evaluating the suppliers. You're going to be the customer to them, right? Don't let them, don't just go with the first people you find. Dig into them and get them to answer your question. If they don't answer your question, they don't value you as a customer, go find another supplier, because 9 times out of 10, there's going to be another supplier, right? So you want to be conducting supplier evals and surveys. There's a lot of good templates out there. There's also some other stuff that so there's a lot of great resources out there, but it's really crucial. Send that off, fire that off, get it filled out. Don't be afraid to do on-site surveys too. I know that right now with COVID, it's hard to do that, but try to work it out. Hey, maybe you can go there on a Saturday where you just walk around with one person, asking questions, checking their place out. Do they have, are they a safety hazard, right? Do they have a bunch of oily rags next to the flare box in a corner over there? Like, is that the kind of supplier you want, right? So you want to try to get on site and check those things out as best you can, or do a virtual audit, just have them carry a camera around and point things out and show you around and all that stuff through FaceTime or Skype or whatever. I mean, there's 100 different ways to do that, right? Now, you want to really focus on your critical components. Those might be things that are custom made for you. Like you've had to get some tooling made, and then you take that tooling and you're going to send it to an injection molder. And the injection molder is going to hold on to that tooling for you. You want to really stay on top of those people and see what they're doing on a week-to-week basis. And see how they're, try to find out how they're treating your tooling. Are they storing it correctly? Are they, loading it correctly? All that stuff. You want to make sure you want to stay on top of those people. And the other things are things that have a long lead times, right? Like maybe it's not a critical item. Maybe it's a nut or a bolt or a screw or something or it's not a critical item, but maybe it takes a long time to get. Maybe you got to order 50,000, rivets at a time. And it takes a long time to get those rivets. So you can find other rivets, like you can order them in packs of 100 right now from McMaster, but you really want those 50,000 because you get a better price break, right? So it could be a long lead time. You want to pay attention to things like that as well, and be in regular communication with your suppliers. Check in with them weekly or monthly. Get to know the POC there. I mean, know their name. Try to know their birthday. Like really get to know the people at those companies, because you'll see red flags pop up really quick. If that POC changes their attitude with you or changes communication standards, something's up, and you need to dig in real quick and figure out what's going on. Okay, make sure you understand your logistics chain from start to finish. Okay, and this is going to go into the shipping to from geopolitical, weather, and timing. So right now, China and Australia are having some disagreements on coal coming from Australia into China, right? And China is using that coal to power the furnaces to make steel. Okay, and that steel goes out around the world to manufacture all types of products, right? Are your products going to be impacted by that shortage because the steel, right, that they're using, the output is lower? Okay, so if the output is lower, that means that they're going to start choosing their suppliers of who's going to get that, right? So think about how that impacts you, right? There's also, another current demand is a shortage and a high demand for propane all over the world and oxygen all over the world. Are these products using your processes, right? What is your backup for these critical components or supplies that you might be using, these consumables you might be using? Okay, and maybe there's a blizzard forming in the Northeast, or maybe there's a hurricane forming off the East Coast or something like that really is going to impact, the CONUS, continental United States, but it's going to impact that ship that's coming over with your supplies, or a plane that's coming over with your supplies, or something like that. It's going to stop a truck from driving to you, right? You want to think about those things. You want to just stay on top of those current events that are playing out to make sure that you can mitigate any shutdowns in your manufacturing line, right? And then the other thing with external impacts, just look at tax implications and tax laws. Get yourself a good accountant to review that stuff with you. Figure out what the consequences of purchasing things at a certain time. Timing your fiscal years with your customers' fiscal years, or your suppliers' fiscal years, just to kind of really take advantage of whatever tax benefits might be out there. Okay, so some really basic software tools, right? I did a lot of stuff with MS Excel. I mean, just a lot. You can do a lot, and it's practically free to do. The little blacked out image on the left is an Excel doc that I use, and there's in one of the products that I was part of inventing that Delta invented was had over 200 parts, and I think there's probably over 100 processes to create that product. And it was a real challenge trying to figure out how to get all that stuff done and down into a reasonable time to and with the least amount of people as possible. I find that kind of you reach there's a happy point where if you have too few people, you overwork them and you have mistakes. If you have too many people, you have ambiguity in who's responsible for which process, and you have more mistakes as well, right? So I spent a lot of time, and kind of the grayed out image on the left is just all the processes and procedures boiled down into a smaller step, and then those are boiled down into the stations, right? So you're gonna have stations where you build these products. And it could be, if you're doing things like, let's say you have to deliver the product unassembled to your customer, at some point you have a delineation of, okay, we're going to package this up, deliver it, and do the rest of this assembly on site. And these are the checklists we need to have before we roll out, right? And on the right was I used them as project for timing. And I knew down to the second how long each process was gonna take to do. And then I added some slack in there for for mistakes or whatever. But I knew pretty much down to the second how long each process is going to take, so that I knew how much that was going to cost, and I had it down to the kilowatt hour of what it was going to cost on power and consumables and labor, and what is my labor cost going to be in the G&A and overhead costs and all that stuff. So I knew what it was going to basically cost me per minute across the entire company to be manufacturing these devices, and the calculations came out pretty good. So just some examples of what I use. I like to keep things really, really simple. Use the stuff that is widely available, widely supported, especially for new startups. Like, you can get a more advanced ERP system, but if you go with QuickBooks or something in Zoho or something like that, but there's thousands of free videos out there, free YouTube videos, free resources, because it's been around for so long, right? So Excel, Project, QuickBooks, Dazuki, Zoho is a really good one. Zoho has a lot of different packages out there. A lot of Google's coming out with a lot more stuff as well. that you can use just to kind of bootstrap and get you going, and then LabVIEW as well. So then the last one is I put this to itself because this is really important. I've seen a lot of companies just get lost, right? Just get lost and kind of forget where they're going. You know, it'd be like, you know, think of it like you're going to go on a long road trip across the country. You're going to drive from California to New York. You're going to use a map. You're going to use a GPS. You're going to use something like, you can go without a map, but how long is that going to take you? And are you going to feel confident to do that, right? So when you develop a quality manual, quality management manual, or your quality system manual, that's your map, right? So that when you sit down, you start thinking, okay, these are the things that we want to do. These are the things that are important to us to ensure that we have quality for our customers. You want to write those things down, you want to record them, and you want to record how you're going to measure those things as well, and how often you want to measure those things. And then as things go along, you know, you want to keep those at the forefront, you know, keep them out where you can see them every day. You make sure you're doing those things and sticking to your plan. You know, it's tragic to not have a plan and to not follow it right. So establish your QMS, establish your KPIs, and your KPIs, those can be measured on a daily, any scale from a daily to a yearly basis. You figure that out, right? And those things should change if you notice that, oh, you know what, we have some more mistakes that are making it through. We need to increase our audit process to make sure that these things are making it through, especially in the medical world. You really have to stay on top of that stuff, right? So yeah, make sure you keep all the reasons you came up with to create a process or procedure should be documented and available to the entire company. All right, this should be used to create a quality management system, and then from there you can make some additional SOPs. And everything you do, you know, you want to develop some kind of standard operating procedure for how that process occurs, from ordering inventory to shipping a unit out to receiving inventory. That's a big one, right? You receive your inventory and you want to inspect it as soon as you get it. Inspect it, right? And then what are the shipping guidelines? Like, you know, was it damaged in shipping? Is the shipper responsible? Was it broke when they sent it? Like, is the supplier responsible, right? You want to keep track of that stuff. I don't know how many times, you know, we have, you know, companies I've worked with or been a part of, and inventory sitting on the shelf for like 6 months before it gets used, and all of a sudden, oh, every single one of these has a crack in it and we can't use it. Like, whoa, that's a big disaster to deal with, right? You know, like I said, I'm gonna harp on some more. You know, build your QMS, build your KPIs, establish SOPs for every single process. You know, there's a process for hiring. You need to have an SOP for that, right? What do you do when you hire someone new, or how do you go about hiring someone? So, you know, what do you do if a unit does fail in the QA/QC process? Just think about what you want to do and be prepared for that stuff. Because you know, you can kind of in situ, in the moment, you can kind of, you know, adjust ad hoc and make things work. But it's really nice if you have some training and some guidelines in place so that you can quickly you know, deal with the issue and move on and resolve it, right? Kind of have that ready in place. And that's it.